Are you ready to enhance your spiritual and magical practice while learning about the arcane Gnostic mysteries? Join the redeemed Archon Sabaoth on his fool's journey with the Gnostic Tarot. Learn about the journey of the Gnostic Jesus. Follow Mary Magdalene in her quest for forbidden knowledge. Experience the celestial majesty of Bar Below, the Supreme Mother. Commune with the invisible spirit or the one of the Gnostics. Accompany the Gnostic sage Marcelina as she weaves primordial mysticism. Engage with Marcus the Magician and his coven of Gnostic witches. Experience the fall and liberation of Sophia in the simulation. Also discover the sagas of Abraxas, Simon Magus, Thunder, Valentinus, and more. In the end, see if Sabaoth and Sophia can unite to defeat the Demiurge. The Gnostic Tarot is perfect for divination and gnosis, the knowledge of the heart. Cast alchemical fire upon the world like Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas. Or grasp the mysteries of existence like Mary in the Gnostic Gospels. Happy heresies, and yes, welcome to the desert of the real. Welcome to Aeon Byte. Welcome to the Virtual Alexandria. The original Alexandria, Jung called it that place where East meets West. This is that state of mind where East meets West. My name is Miguel Connor, and I am your Pompadour of Gnosis, that madman across the waters of creation. We are running with those searching for the truth and avoiding those who have found it. We are not the final authority on anything, but hope to be an endless possibility for everything. You are the final authority, have always been, and it's time you understood your power. And as always, perhaps most important, my tagline, I hope you're writing your own gospel and living your own myth. And I am very excited about today's show. We will be ending September, August and September has been a very Jungian month, both by cosmic orders and design, because these ideas are more important than ever before humanity fully fragments into chaos and Jung's warning about the psyche and warfare completely come true. So with us today, I'm very excited to have Dr. Luke Johnson. Luke, thank you very much for coming to the Virtual Alexandria.
It's a pleasure to be here, Miguel. I have to say that your show is one of the most profound resources I've come across on the internet. So this merging of the minds is a big deal for me and perhaps for others. I thought perhaps before we get into the subject of today's conversation, just to give a little background to people, so I don't come across as too pedantic. I know that a lot of people who watch your program, including yourself, are deeply, deeply versed in Jung. I'm kind of a newcomer. I have a PhD, but my dissertation was on Soren Kierkegaard many moons ago. And I created a educational social media environment. And in that process, had my eyes open to wider areas of study. And I became deeply fascinated with the cryptographical elements in film, specifically the works of Stanley Kubrick. That's when I started to share some of my own research about 2 years ago. And I don't think that subject is a stranger to your platform. But I think while I was doing a lot of my writing and research on Kubrick, I kind of felt like, the indexing of all the cryptographical elements is interesting in and of itself, but there's a larger metaphysics going on. And I had seen enough evidence to conclude that it's all running through Jung. And so what I've had to do in a hurry is to teach myself as much Jung as possible. And the way that I do this is by putting together presentations and disseminating them on podcasts and my own YouTube channel and Instagram, et cetera, et cetera. And you can find me on, I have a YouTube and a Instagram and a Twitter. You can find me on this first slide that we'll show. Today, I don't know if it's unorthodox or orthodox. I'm going to be kind of reading a lot of prose that I've put together on Carl Jung's 15th volume in the collected works. And we're going to be discussing two particular essays from it, and I'll get into that. And I guess it's kind of dynamic. I was mentioned to Miguel, I practiced this earlier today. It took me about 50 minutes to get through it. I don't just run roughshod over you guys. So if you stop me, ask questions, interject, and yeah, because it's kind of a lot of material. So for myself to synthesize it all, I have to kind of write it down. But I appreciate the colorful commentary along the way, and people who can, I'm sure both of you can help me understand some things that I may have been a little flippant about.
Sure, sure, of course. Yeah, our audience is very well versed. Thanks for the kind words. Vince and I and Graham are trying to spread as much light, including through all the algorithm suppression we have to suffer, which has always been a battle, but it is reality. So we're definitely excited. Yeah, and for the audience, Luke is in Virginia. I think he's getting some of what's the name of the hurricane? Helen, which
Yeah, you know what?
very
And
Gnostic. Simon's stormy priestess of the moon.
right. I found that to be synchronous. I don't watch any news or anything. Of course, I get it from social media, but this kind of appeared out of nowhere. But Helena is going to be a figure that we talk about today. Maybe it'll come up specifically because we're going to be talking a lot about Goethe's Faust, and in Faust Part 2, Helena Troy is a big part of that story. So it kind of, when I was like, oh man, this hurricane could potentially disrupting our internet connection, and it's within the name comes from Faust, or I don't know if it comes from Faust, but it's featured prominently in Faust.
Yeah, and many scholars have noted, Faust is based on Simon Magus, a lot of it, the legend and everything. There was a legend of Simon Magus, and it developed into Faust. Goethe wasn't the first one by far. It had been around for hundreds of years. So
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we must say hi. Hey, Vance, how are you doing? Any hurricanes?
I'm okay. No hurricanes. Very looking out the window here. It's very nice and sunny and a little warm.
Are you sure? I thought you were in outer space.
The only hurricane has Newsom destroying your state piece by piece.
Oh, don't get me into that. I'm collecting plastic bags now.
Yeah, they've been banned. They've been banned in Chicago for a long time, I think so. But anyway, let's not get into that. Awesome. For the audience, I see you piling in. Good to see everybody. I hope everybody's well on this Freya day. And as always, if you have any questions or complaints against Vance and I, please super chat them. Not much on the housekeeping. As always, please support this show. Please help keep the lights of the Pleroma on. Keep in mind that all three Astronoses are now available for replay for one price. If you join the Virtual Alexandria Academy, you will get also these replays, all on the show notes, including the Gnostic Tarot, if you saw that very cool intro. And yes, I do have Luke's YouTube also on the show notes, so check out his channels. Excellent presentations on all things Jung. So, and I feel God, I feel I'm just getting Jung after all these years. It's just, there's knowing him, and then suddenly it starts to, like a tattoo, it starts to get under your skin and stick. So I'm still learning. So shall we get started, Luke?
I think so. You're reading me loud and clear, I hope. I guess we can.
Yeah. So far, Ellen hasn't, Ellen has deemed we are fine. So I am going to put up the presentation. Where are you, little thing here? There you go. And I will hit present. Where's the present button on this thing? Yes, it is. Oh boy. Yeah, God, I haven't used PowerPoint in so long. I don't even know where the button is. I'm so used to using Google Slides and so forth.
I hear you.
Display settings, present. What are you? I don't know what you are. Where in the dickens is the present button? Add-on designer. I can't see it. Can anybody pull up there? Vance, can you do you have PowerPoint?
This is actually Google Slides.
I do. Oh,
no, I had to put it on the PowerPoint because it was messing up the thing.
All right, here.
Let's see. Sorry about that, guys.
PowerPoint.
Usually, all these things have a big button.
So
PowerPoint. PowerPoint has nothing.
Slideshow. Look up and look for slideshow.
But where's that at?
On the menu, file, home, insert, draw, blah blah blah. Slideshow. Can you see it up there?
No, it's not appearing on mine.
Take it to the right of your cursor.
Yeah, there's designer, add-ins, dictate.
It's up there. Here, look under power. The word power. Wait a minute.
Transitions, animation, slideshow.
No, I'm not seeing it.
Slideshow. Look for recent record, and then to the left of that. Can you see record on the menu?
Yeah, I see. On the left. Okay. Yeah, mine is a little button. Awesome.
It's a slideshow.
Got it. No, it's not. I don't have it. Share.
I see it. I see it on your
screen.
screen.
We can see it. It's right next to it.
See, look.
Record. Share.
Look, one over.
This one?
From record, and then one over to slideshow.
I'm not seeing it.
Put your cursor.
I've got it. I've got my cursor under record.
On the top.
Right, left. Huh?
Left one. What do you see? On the
I
left
see comments.
You're not on the same thing that you're showing.
I am not.
No.
Your cursor.
Okay.
Can you put your cursor right over the top of the bust of Homer?
The bust of Homer. Yes.
Yeah. Go straight up.
Up.
Oh, slideshow.
There it is.
The well, why didn't you tell me on the menu? From beginning. All right, let's sorry about that, guys. I'll have to take it out. All right, can you see it?
Yeah, and then you click from beginning. See on the ribbon there on the.
Well, the problem is now it's taken me completely off my. Okay, now I can't see even my own screen. Oh boy! All right, we have a little bit of problem. Yeah, why don't we move over here because I can't. As soon as I did that, it blanked out all my screens, including my StreamYard. So.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, for both screens. So.
Yeah, and we can't see the other. We can't see.
Yeah, Luke, you could do a screen share. Maybe it'll work better for you.
How do I do that?
Why don't we? Yeah, probably too late to do that. All right. Why don't we just work off of this?
Yeah, that's fine. They'll get the gist.
Yeah, apologies.
Yeah, they'll get the gist. All right. So this first slide, I included it because I want to illustrate the familiarity that Jung had with so many works of great literature. I'm not sure that's something that's widely understood by the connoisseur of Jung. Perhaps it is, but I think it really comes through in the book that we're going to talk about today. I think it's a great picture. I think it has deep meaning, especially given my interest in Kubrick in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Both of these books, both 2001: Space Odyssey and what Jung is going to talk about today in The Spirit in Man, Art and Literature, going to draw inspiration from Homer. And as I mentioned, we're going to be looking at the spirit in man, art, and literature. And the two essays that we're going to look at, this is a collation of essays. The first one on the relation of analytical psychology to poetry and psychology in literature. On the relation of analytical psychology to poetic art was first published in the British Journal of Medical Psychology in August of 1923. The second essay, Psychology in Literature, was first published in Berlin in 1930, but then was expanded and revised in Zurich in 1950. For those interested, as Miguel mentioned earlier, I have already covered Jung's essay on Ulysses from this volume on my YouTube channel. So let's begin with on the relation of analytical psychology to poetry. Art is uncontroversially a psychological activity. However, the application of psychological analysis is limited in practice. Artistic creation may be subject to psychological study, but what art is in and of itself remains a question for aesthetics alone. The same goes for religion. Psychology can address the emotions and phenomenology of the symbols. However, it cannot exhaustively explain their essential nature, and for this reason, art and religion cannot be considered subspecies of reductionist psychology. Jung's concerns are motivated in part by his awareness that psychology itself could be reduced to mere brain activity if a line is not drawn. Even if art, science, and religion intermingle in the minds of the less advanced, such as children, it does not follow that a reductionist principle underlies all these activities. Jung endeavors in this way to turn back the Freudian psychoanalytical tide encroaching on the art world, which aimed to reduce all art products as explicable in terms of personal neurosis. It may be true that many great artists suffered from neurosis, and that knowledge of personal struggles contextualizes their work. However, it can never account for the product of their genius entirely. Jung writes with the Freudian methodology in his Sights, and I quote, "It strips the work of art of its shimmering robes and exposes the nakedness and drabness of Homo sapiens, to which species the poet and artist also belong. The golden gleam of artistic creation, the original object of discussion, is extinguished as we apply to it the same corrosive method which we use in analyzing the fantasies of hysteria," unquote. Imagine the inanity of exhuming Nietzsche's brain for a scan to gain an insight into Zarathustra, or allowing a Freudian to diagnose Plato's allegory of the cave as dealing with the womb. No, these works of arts, if we consider them art, are worlds in and of themselves, beyond the mere psychophysiology of common humanity. The reductionist campaign misses the entire point due to blinding zeal. I'm going to read just a little bit more and we'll have a little discussion here. Jung's analytical psychology approach does not treat art as a disease, but rather something supra-personal. Jung effectively analogizes the relationship between art and artist to that of the dynamic between plant and soil. And I quote, "It is a creative reorganization of those very conditions to which a causalistic psychology must always reduce it. The plant is not a mere product of the soil. It is a living, self-contained process, which in essence has nothing to do with the character of the soil. In the same way, the meaning and the individual quality of a work of art inhere within it, and not in its extrinsic determinants. One might also describe it as a living being that uses man only as a nutrient medium, employing his capacities according to its own laws and shaping itself to the fulfillment of its own creative purpose." This is not to say that Jung believes all works germinate in the same way within the artist. One group of artists totally identifies with the creative process, imposing stylistic rules with careful precision at every moment, And then there are artists who work completely through inspiration, where conscious decision takes a backseat to what Jung calls the magic circle of an alien will. That's probably going to be the most continuous I'm going to read, but I wanted to offer that opening salvo.
Yeah, beautiful words, very important words for sure. And yeah, I'm glad Jung was there battling because, of course, it's been an ongoing battle, right? The CIA in the 20th century trying to destroy art because it somehow destroyed communists. Like today, the material reductionist movement is trying to do what the Freudians were doing, and the fight still continues. And that I like that picture of you. Is that your birthday party? With the
Oh,
Barbie?
I didn't really think too much about it. I don't have a lot of pictures of myself. No, that's me last summer at
The movie.
I went and saw the double header of
Mm,
Oppenheimer and Barbie.
mm,
And truthfully, both of those are very symbolic. I guess what Jung would call, as we'll get into it, visionary works of art.
mhm.
I actually had the opportunity at a local film festival to dialogue in a public forum with the Kai was it Kai Bird? Is that his name? He did the source text for the Oppenheimer movie, and I got to ask him if he picked up on the Jungian elements within Oppenheimer, because he wrote American Prometheus, the thing that Nolan
Right.
used to make the movie. Um, I don't I don't think I articulated my question well enough for him to understand what I was saying, but at least I got to ask it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, but
It's
yeah,
weird, but yeah, people say to me all the time, they're like, "Luke, why did you go see Barbie? Why did you like Barbie?" Like the whole Barbie movie is a very political, schismatic thing. Like you had like if you liked Barbie or don't like Barbie is like dependent on your politics. And I was like, guys, this is like a richly symbolic movie, like
yeah,
politics aside.
yeah, yeah, it's very Gnostic. Again, a lot of Jungian themes, and
And
it's,
Kubrickian.
yeah, definitely true, so, yeah. I like, the director, what's the name? Greta Wig. I still like Lady Bird much better, but Barbie was pretty decent,
Yeah.
and, my kids really liked it. They thought Ken stole the show, all 3 of them, so
I think that's the general consensus. I actually believe that now, looking at it now, I've kind of updated the file on how I view art through this presentation and really my own inner detective work. It seems like Oppenheimer and Barbie are in a dynamic conversation with one another.
Mhm,
The maker of the bomb and the movie about the bombshell. And it's also kind of an Adam and Eve story.
right,
Ken and Barbie are Adam and Eve, and the bomb is kind of like this forbidden fruit of knowledge.
yeah.
Not to mention Oppenheimer tried to poison his tutor with a poison apple.
Yeah,
So you've got the
yeah,
biblical narrative. It's and the bomb's named Trinity. It's so cinematically rich with symbols. And I just like, is this orchestrated or is the unconscious, the collective unconscious, coursing through these directors? And as time has gone on, I think it's more of the latter.
I would agree, and it also shows you that these minds that were so on a level of anything, even including today's sad state of science and intellect, these guys were smart because they were what helped them. They were so deeply into the occult and mysticism, Taoism, Hinduism, and that's really how they expanded their minds, and that got a little bit of love in the movie. How they were
I, th- I,
part-time mystics too.
I feel like Nolan has a grasp of Jung. I don't know as much about Gerwig, and I mean, this is me speculating. I don't know,
Yeah, no.
but
Yeah, yeah, definitely Nolan for sure.
yeah,
All right, well, let's get to the next slide. Let's see
sure,
here. Do-do-do-do-do.
yeah. So yeah, this is a great slide. I'd had to do a lot of preparation in addition to reading the Jung article or articles for this presentation. Um, so let me just go through what we have on the screen here.
Sure.
In what follows, Jung is going to discuss Schiller's distinction of naive and sentimental poetry and Goethe's Faust pretty extensively. In the center here, we have a statue of the aforementioned literature heavyweights. Schiller's naive and sentimental poetry text is difficult to come by, but I believe the Schiller Institute has made an affordable English translation available. Ironically, we're nearly neighbors. To prepare for this presentation, and that's a whole interesting rabbit hole. To prepare for this presentation, I was able to view Heinz Schirk's 1986 Maria Stuart on YouTube, which was really good. I don't know if you guys have ever seen a Schiller play before. This is the only one I got to watch. It was awesome. I recommend everybody watch it. It's free. I believe it's a German version done in 86, and it has subtitles. It also came to my attention that Jung had written about the distinction between naive and sentimental poetry in volume 6, Psychological Types. Now, Psychological Types came out in 1921, so that what we cover today may be seen as a progression or refinement of those earlier views. I have had the time to skim it, and it appears that Jung does not confine himself to Schiller's writing on naive and sentimental poetry. He also applies his typology theory to Schiller's letter on the aesthetic education of man. I didn't have time to get into it, but I did have time to peruse it. And you see here, this is a great statue of Goethe and Schiller. It's highly symbolic as well. I couldn't break it down for you, but they're holding this crown, this wreath, and the scroll. There's lots of little Easter eggs in here.
Yeah.
And here is a picture from the Maria Stuart play that I saw. It's about well, it's a kind of open for interpretation who it's about, but I think the Red Queen, I believe, is Elizabeth I, which, ironically, tracing it back to Barbie, I believe Margot Robbie did this movie recently. I don't know if it's called Mary Stuart, but I think it came out since Barbie or something like that. So we got a little bit of a fractal happening here.
Yeah.
She's almost unrecognizable. She goes from like Barbie being the quintessential bleach blonde to looking like the Red Queen from Alice in Wonderland, and not in a flattering way at all.
Yeah, so, she's got talent, no doubt about that.
She does. I've noticed that certain actors seem to carry like this alchemical load around with them, and Margot Robbie seems to be one of them. Mm-hmm. But that's a whole thing. So if we go to slide 3.
Okay.
I had to do a little bit of homework. I didn't have time to go back and I didn't have time to go through the Naive and Sentimental Poetry book, but I did consult good old Wikipedia and the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So they're pretty much saying the same thing. So let's just look at the differences between Schiller's naive and sentimental view. And the reason why we're doing this is that Jung is going to expand upon this throughout the rest of our presentation. So the naive view is characterized, it's poetry of direct description. It has a straight narrative. Schiller thinks that all classical Greek poets wrote this way, with the exception of Euripides. And the unreflective naive artist is connected to nature, is guided by instinct, and imitates nature. Products are pure, direct, and done with ease. The naive poets touch us through nature, unlike the sentimental poets, which we'll see in a second. Typically, we think of them as less evolved, easy, at peace, and everything is sort of attained through nature. And there's a finite greatness as the teleology of the naive view of poetry. Now we contrast this with the sentimental view, which has an element of self-consciousness to it. This is going to be something that plagues modernity, according to Schiller. It's self-reflective poetry, and it's built around the author's reflections and relationships to the material. There's this mediating force. It's lost that direct connection to nature. And with the exception of Shakespeare and Goethe, although we'll see that Jung is going to quibble with this, almost all modern poetry is considered sentimental in Schiller's eyes. And Jung thinks, or Schiller claimed, that modern people are separated from nature. Therefore, the evolved modern poet clings to nature with sweet melancholy. He longs for the relationship that he may have had to it in the past. And the only real way that he can touch us is through his ideas, not nature itself, because of that mediating force. And it's typically characterized by higher development of human potential culture, though we, as I mentioned, still long for that naive view. But the upshot to the sentimental view is that there is kind of, I guess, what Schiller called an infinite greatness that one can reach through it. So I can't go too much deeper into it, but that is the crib notes. That's the Cliff Notes version of what Schiller had to say in his Naive and Sentimental Poetry book, which is it's not circulated well. I think the more authoritative translations, it's going to cost like over $100 to get a copy.
Whoa.
But someone should do that. Someone should do it. And Miguel, I say all this, who one of a guest that you've had on, and I'm going to name check him again later in this presentation, who's just an absolute baller, who knows so much more than me, is Paul Bishop. That guy, like, I don't know if Paul's listening right now. Paul has written a book, I believe. Paul seems to have written a book on everything. But
he really has.
and I think at some point he actually addressed Jung and Schiller and Goethe somewhere. And I wouldn't be surprised if he covers this in even greater depth than I'm going to today. So
very much. Yeah.
Mad props to Paul. I would have bought your book and read it, but I didn't have the time. If he wants to do a collaboration one day, hit me up.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to slide 4 and look at how Jung expands upon the Schillerian, I guess, view of naive and sentimental poetry. He has a lot to say in this first essay. He thinks the naive view of creation, he calls it extroverted, because it's characterized by the subject's subordination to the demands which the object makes upon him. Right? I think there is something kind of more passive. The subject of the art process is speaking to him rather than he is imposing certain ideas upon it. And certain examples of this are Goethe's Faust Part 2. Now, Jung makes a distinction that the differences between Faust 1 and Faust Part 2 are drastic, and we're going to look at those differences in the next slide. So I think he would disagree with Goethe being labeled purely sentimental or naive. Faust is not a homogeneous work, according to Jung. But also examples of the naive view are Nietzsche's Thus Spake Zarathustra and Schiller's philosophical writings. Jung claimed that poets can be an introverted or extroverted type, but can make art with either the introverted or extroverted attitude, as seen by literary figures creating great works of both varieties. We have Faust 2 being naive, but Faust 1 being sentimental. We have Schiller's philosophical writings being naive, but Schiller's plays, as we'll see in a moment, being sentimental. The poet's consciousness on the naive view is not identical to the creative process. Rather, there's an alien external inspiration that, in reality, according to Jung, is actually his own self. So we're going to get into it. It's going to be the unconscious, the collective unconscious. The expectation here is that works of this type will transcend both the artist's consciousness and our understanding because of this alien will. Works that have strange form and content, meaningful language, and symbols of the unknown can be found here. These works clearly mean more than they say, and the symbols are discernible despite our inability to completely grasp their meaning. There's something that we can't entirely figure out about them. And because the aesthetic reception is such, the undefined symbols are highly stimulating. However, they rarely afford pure aesthetic satisfaction. Now, as far as the sentimental view goes, Jung calls this introverted, the subject's assertion of his conscious intentions and aims against the demands of the object. So we are imposing a blueprint upon the object of what we want to achieve artistically. And Jung, as I've mentioned, gives some examples of this. Schiller's plays. I said Faust 1, but perhaps other of Goethe's poems, which I'm not familiar with. Maybe you guys are. And Nietzsche's aphorisms, which I am familiar with. Here, the poet's consciousness is identical to the creative process. He thinks he is free, but still, even though he's imposing this blueprint upon the art object, it's almost like the unconscious finds a back door, and he's still affected by an alien will in the creative process, saying more than he realizes. And this is indirect proof of this unconscious alien will occurs when the poet voluntarily surrenders their creative activity to a higher imperative, or the psychic disturbances when the creative activity is involuntarily broken off. The struggle is realized at that point. One would expect that art of this kind would not transcend the artist's intentions and be readily understood. But unbeknownst to the poet, his work contains symbolic qualities beyond his comprehension that even his audience will not grasp. Both creator and the audience have their consciousness fixed by the spirit of the time. When consciousness evolves, one can revisit the work to understand the hidden symbols. So I think we should have a little conversation about that.
Mm-hmm.
Miguel, I know, didn't you just put out a book on occult Elvis? And the reason why I bring that up is that I've noticed, I haven't gone deep into it, but he used I remember like in college, I had like Elvis Aloha live from Hawaii, like on vinyl. And I remember he would come out to Thus Spake Zarathustra. And I saw it years later on YouTube, and he's wearing the jumpsuit and he's got this big sun symbol on the back. And it's like, what's going on here? Does Elvis even know that he's like potentially tapping into some Mithraic mystery? Like, I don't know. And I wonder about how Elvis would match up on these charts of naive and sentimental. You're kind of the authority on it.
Yeah, no, his suits were designed based on, yes, occult figures and occult ideas and mystic ideas. I know there's some rumors Mitch Horowitz had these documents where it's based on these visions of ascended masters, but he couldn't find them. But yeah, certainly enough. I mean, Thus Spake Zarathustra, Elvis was a big Kubrick fanatic. That's
was
simple.
he?
Oh, yeah.
Was he really?
Yeah, 2001 he liked, but Doctor Strangelove was his favorite all-time movie.
That's so fascinating.
So, yeah, he was plugged into these things.
Yeah, I mean, Elvis seems to be like deeply alchemical himself, and it's this major question that I'm going to try to address at the end, because I'm trying to apply it to like Kubrick. Is like, did they even know who they were, or were they being used by the art? And it's like, like, I don't know much about Elvis, but there's all sorts of conspiracy theories surrounding him, and like the weirdness of being born a twin, and like twins pop up a lot in occultism. It's just,
oh yeah. My book, it's coming out in April. Yeah, all of this will be addressed, and yeah, he knew, and it was one big alchemical cosmic drama, and he knew he was into it too. He knew all these things.
Did he know he had been like written into the script of reality?
Yeah, he knew that. He knew that.
Oh,
and
wow.
he knew, and in my book, he knew when he was going to die. There's lots of evidence, and his death was really a ritual. I mean, you think, just think about it logically. People go, "Oh, he died on the toilet." Well, think of it symbolically. He died on the throne. Yeah. The last book he was reading before he died was
The Face of God.
A scientific view of the face of Jesus. So you know what I mean? And all through the day, he was planning this ritual to leave the world. So, but anyway, that's in the book. That's in the book. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you
I look forward to that when you unveil it. I look forward to that.
Yeah, and even as we'll get into the slides, your ideas of what the Senex and the child Mercury archetype that's in the psyche. Elvis was playing with those too.
Wow. Wow. Cool. Yeah, I don't know if there was anything else you guys wanted me to talk about here in this chart. I think I tried to make it as clear as possible. And if it's not already obvious, these are my words, but I'm heavily paraphrasing Jung to kind of catch the flavor of his writing.
Makes sense. Vance, what do you think so far?
Well, I can see very definitely that Jung's viewpoint and the sentimental view really posits a greater consciousness or force beyond the individual. And even though in those days, I don't think they had a big concept of systems theory, I was thinking earlier that, well, it would be like trying to explain this podcast in terms of all the different computers and circuits and so forth, and the electrons running through the gates in the computer. And there's no way on that level that you could really see or understand the kinds of things that are going on in the system itself. Because the system itself consists of all the individuals, like Luke, you and me, and all the computers and all the people out that are watching this. That's a system, an egregore almost. So there you go. So that the naive view is the materialistic view. That's
Yeah.
the way it impresses me. And the sentimental view is the view that it's beyond an individual's, like a systemic view. And I think that's what Jung was really feeling, if not directly describing.
Well, Vance, I think what you have to say here is very valuable. I would push back a little bit. I think you're right, and also perhaps I need to clarify a few things. The naive view, I don't think Jung believes that to be materialistic at all. What I think he is trying to communicate about the naive view is that something beyond the individual, from the depths of the collective unconscious, is taking over the individual artist and manifesting the symbols of the collective unconscious, really kind of in an effort to, we'll get to this, to redirect the destiny of mankind. But that's not to say what you're saying about the systems that are involved in the sentimental view, although we haven't really gotten into the granularity of it, that these artists that are creating according to their own sort of blueprint. And when I say blueprint, like I could, like when talking about it could be just like the structure, like what they're trying to do is to achieve a certain sort of narrative arc, to tidy things up, to make things happen in like concrete and discrete acts and movements and things like that. It may just be like a simple template that they're following, or there might be a greater abstract aesthetic theory that they're trying to impose upon it. I don't know if it's like Aristotelian or something like that they're trying to do to make what they think to be great art. But I don't want to say here that Jung is necessarily saying that one form of artistic creation is better than another, although I think his proclivity is to say that the naive view of art it has something special to it because it's the collective unconscious breaking through the individual. They just kind of accomplish different means. And I think maybe the way I've laid it out here is a little bit misleading by saying here's naive on one side and sentimental on the other side, and they never overlap. But clearly, when talking about the sentimental view, that even despite the best efforts of the sentimental mode of creation, the collective unconscious can still find its way in. Even the sentimental artist is not even aware of it. And he says, decades, centuries later, when you have more evolved conscious individuals, they may come back to the work of art and find it replete with symbols that were missed by the original audience. So there is that there does seem to be a dynamic interplay of the collective unconscious and the ego consciousness that are being mixed together in sentimental art, but the artists themselves don't even recognize what's going on. The naive artists may not even understand that they're being used by the collective unconscious. They might just be along for the ride.
I see. I didn't really catch that subtle thing. I was enticed by the naive views that, well, it was directly descriptive. The Greeks, doing directly descriptive. So I kind of keyed on that.
It does sound less evolved, doesn't it? It does sound primitive, but that doesn't necessarily mean lesser. It just may be, yeah.
Well, a point of view of the author of the naive material, not being aware of what they're doing, maybe something's being channeled through them,
right,
unbeknownst to them.
Right.
I see. So in either case, I guess Jung was saying that that underpinnings of us, the greater reality, is coming through in both sides. Is that what you would say? And it's just that in the sentimental view, it's like the individual's putting more of themselves in it consciously.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
I think the collective unconscious is more freely flowing through the naive form of creation, and the sentimental artist may be trying to suppress it to a certain degree, and that might lead to struggle, like writer's block, or like, why can't I finish this, or like, why is it not working out like the way I want to? It seems like I'm at odds with myself. So that the sentimental artist may be squashing or attempting to squash the collective unconscious, but it'll find a way in.
Okay.
That's my understanding. I'm not the authority. I just, I didn't even know this book existed 4 months ago. So, I'm just a little, maybe a little ahead of other people. That I wasn't able to find. I don't think anyone had really done anything on this on the internet. So this is, I find it interesting. This might be the first time this has ever been discussed in any meaningful way on the internet. So,
Cool.
so if we can go to why don't we go to the next slide?
All right.
I thought this was important just so because Faust is so much of the discussion, and I included here. We can take a look at the memes I have here on the right side. I got this meme. There's a Instagram account, Carl Jung memes. I got this from.
Oh, wow.
Evil Carl Jung be like, I am probably not related to Goethe. I'm sure everybody knows this, but like Jung liked to repeat what may be legend, what may be true. I don't know, that he was maybe the illegitimate great grandson of Goethe.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that's part of the reason why he's so obsessed with Faust. And I don't know if you guys have seen this. I saw the most amazing rendition of Faust. The bottom right-hand corner, this is a still from the YouTube video. It's, I don't know if I can say this, Jan Schwackmeer's Faust from 1994. Have you guys seen this?
No.
It's on YouTube. It's free. It's on YouTube. It's free. It's so amazing. It's a very disorienting mixture of like Faust 1 and 2 down to like 90 minutes, but it involves stop motion animation, claymation, puppetry, avant-garde theater. It was like a joint work between like Britain and the Czech Republic and America. And it was, I don't know if you don't know Faust at all, I don't know if I would recommend this being the place to start, or maybe it should be the place you start. It was so bonkers. And I guess this guy has done other things like Alice in Wonderland that I want to check out now, but it was really avant-garde, really amazing. Cool. It's free.
Awesome.
And it's dubbed, because it was a joint collaboration with English speaking countries, it got dubbed into English. So, and dubbed well. It's not bad dubbing. So, yeah, I just thought it would probably be good to review the differences between Faust 1 and Faust 2. And I've switched the categories here. Sentimental now is on the left, but naive is on the right. But Faust 1, Faust 1 is kind of straightforward. It may not be as structured as Faust 2, but it occurs in a much smaller world. It's straightforward. It was first published in 1808, and it basically is, just about Faustus' bargain with Mephistopheles. And, there's kind of like a nice little, this is what we're going to accomplish. Here's the structure. This is what we're going to do. And then as we see, the second part of Faust, I didn't even realize this until I got deep into it. It didn't come out until 24 years later, 1 year after Goethe passed away. He said, don't publish us until I die. And he had it like locked in a drawer, and they published it 1 year after he passed. And though it adheres to more conventional organization, the topics that it addresses occur in the much wider world of the macrocosmos, and there's so much allegory and classical mythology in it that it can't help but be transmuted into some sort of allegorical or alchemical work of art. And it covers things like psychology, philosophy, politics, mysticism, and history. And so I can't speak to all this symbology in it, but it's there. And I think that's why Jung is going to call this a naive work of art, is that Goethe, as he progressed in age, created more room. He wasn't as concerned about having a neat, tidy psychological product and say, this is what happens when you make a deal with the devil, and here's how you outsmart him. And, like he allowed something to work through him by opening up the cosmos of Faust and Faust 2. So I think that's what's happening there. Now, if we go to slide 6, this is just, I thought this was super interesting. I don't know if many people know this. I'm a student of the space age. I'm deeply interested in the Apollo program. And I don't know if people know this, but they name all the landing sites for each moon landing. I think most people know that the Eagle landed in the Sea of Tranquility, which is very interesting alchemically. But on Apollo 17, the landing sites were all named after works of great fiction. And one of them was one of the places that they toured was Faust crater. And I just thought that was interesting because in the space program,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
we kind of had to do a Faustian bargain if anyone's familiar with the character of Wernher von Braun. But
Yeah.
I won't spiral to I don't know how
Yeah, now we're
we're
really going into some spicy places, if you would.
yeah. I know not to go
Don't
there.
even get Kubrick involved, or we'll just go spiral into conspiracy.
Oh, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that. Totally unrelated in slide 7. Totally unrelated in slide 7. I did not know this, but Schiller's Ode to Joy is actually part of the 4th movement of Beethoven's 9th Symphony, which we see in Clockwork Orange. That's played for
Oh,
little
wow.
Alex. And I
Yeah.
think so. This adds an interesting interpretive layer. So something I thought, this is just a note that I'm going to pen and maybe someone else will come back to one day, is that my suspicion is that Kubrick may be inviting us to consider Schiller's theories on crime, punishment, and aesthetics when it comes to the fate of little Alex. Schiller wrote a lot about crime and punishment. I'm not someone to ask about it, but I think it's something, it may be a little hint, or maybe it's something that's delivered up by the collective unconscious saying, hey, look at this. Yeah, so I think that's so. Returning to Jung and this, I love these maps of the psyche that are kind of floating out there. Some of them seem to be more authoritative than others. They very much help orient me. Thinking of the creative process as something planted within the human psyche, which draws nourishment from the individual and yet has its own teleology, prompts Jung to identify it as an autonomous complex. This scion of the psyche exists outside the hierarchy of consciousness and may cause disturbances to conscious activities or redirect the ego for its purposes. And I thought this was helpful. I hope it's not, I really had to teach myself what Jung thought autonomous complexes were. And so I put together another little table here on 9, and maybe you guys have a better understanding of it, but Jung says this about it. He could,
I was gonna, sorry to interrupt, but you see the Puer Eternus.
Yeah.
I have many theories of Elvis, but he certainly was the expression of it. And of course, Senex, Chronos, Time, Saturn was Colonel Parker, and they were both very extreme. Elvis being Mercury, just having fun, and the Colonel being this force of power. And when you united them, well, they conquered the world. So it was the perfect balance of these two. But so
that's I have to get up to speed. I don't, was Colonel Parker with Elvis before his military days, or?
Yeah.
Oh,
But Elvis
wow.
had made it. Yeah, he made it big with Sun Records. But Colonel Parker took him to like global, once, historical sensation,
Where did they even get the name Sun Records? Because that predated Elvis.
Very good. Yeah. Why was he born in Memphis?
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Well, he wasn't born in Memphis. He lived in Memphis.
Right.
When he got, so yeah. When you start looking at Elvis, it just makes so much sense. You go, oh, it's so transparent.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, Miguel. It's like whatever you're looking at, it all you've trained your fixation on Elvis. I mean, I was putting together some thoughts on the atomic bomb and Jung and Adler the other night, and it's all there. It's almost always there. Or when you look at these.
So the universe is always talking. Our soul is always talking to our ego 24/7. It's saying, I got all the answers. I'll project them onto reality. Oh my God, he's not listening. I'm going to make him depressed. He'll listen now.
Yep.
Almost like a fractal reality where all these patterns keep repeating, down, and up, and,
That's, Vance, I agree with you. I'm very grateful to be on your guys' show today. I had a deep awakening experience about 8 years ago, and that required kind of getting deep into the Bible. And the more I got into the Bible, the more I kind of picked up on the Gnostic and simulation theory aspects of it. And, I've come to the place like you talk about, like, I cannot resist the idea that it's simulated in some way, that it's fractal in some way.
Mm-hmm.
So I know a lot of Christian people give me a lot of grief about that, but I can't deny what I'm seeing, so had to get over it. So I figure if I'm pursuing the truth, God will be merciful to me. Let's see here. So yeah, I had to teach myself about autonomous complexes. And, Jung says in this essay that it's a subliminal psychic formation until charged and it rises above the consciousness threshold. And the creative complex is going to be an autonomous complex. And once perceived, its simulation does not necessarily follow. An autonomous complex is not subject to conscious control, thus it cannot be suppressed or reproduced at will. It arrives and vanishes via its own proclivities. The autonomous complexes frequently underlie pathological processes, so it should be no surprise that the inspired artist, in some cases, resembles the mentally disturbed. This is not to say autonomous complexes are morbid in and of themselves, for every instinct essentially has such a quality. Only when they are disturbing is it a sign of mental illness. Autonomous complexes emerge from an unconscious aspect of the psyche and strengthened by activating surrounding areas of association. The autonomous complex feeds on energy from consciousness, gradually eroding conscious interests, such as one's ethics, fostering either apathy or degeneration into something infantile. Jung believes this is why so many artists exhibit passivity and immaturity. And, I have a lot of questions. I've not worked my way through all 20 volumes of the collected works of Jung. I have a lot of questions. I generally understand what Jung is trying to say here about autonomous complexes. I can even see from charts like this or maps like this how the complexes are connected to certain archetypal figures as a nuclei. But there's still mechanisms and just in the granularity of it that I want to find out. But I don't know, maybe people in your audience today don't know what an autonomous complex. Perhaps they were like me a month ago.
Yeah. Well, I love reading this because he wrote so much and I get different insights. But yeah, I tell people just keep going on the complexes, because even Freud agreed that Jung said this is the central theme of my work. And Freud definitely agreed with it because it's such a slam dunk. And when people want to know what a complex is, I think Jung called it a splinter psyche, a splinter that takes over us. The shadow is a complex. It can come over, take over us, and we project it. But there's different complexes that, take over our ego. Some say the ego is the complex, but it's the ruling complex that's supposed to deal with reality. So when you let a superiority complex or something like that take over. So, but yeah, there's so much about complexes.
Right? It's all structures, subsystems within the system.
I believe so.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you guys, had you read these essays or read volume 15 before? I didn't even know if you guys how much background you had.
No.
Okay. Well, that means I'm doing something right if I'm bringing this to people's attention. That's good. There are other great essays in that. There's I initially thought maybe I would do something on Paracelsus. There are a couple essays on Paracelsus there. Ulysses I've done something on. There was some essays on Freud, Richard Wilhelm and the Golden Flower, and as an essay on Picasso. There's an essay on Picasso in there too. So I just, little odds and ends that Jung did that were great.
Yeah. He wrote a lot.
He did. I don't know how he did it. I write a lot and I can't even get one book out. I just keep tearing it up, being like, no, this is, I don't have to worry about trying to have a book pay the bills or something like that, or lose a tenure job or anything like that. I feel like I'm continuing to rewrite something until I can solve this personal mystery. I want to know why the pattern keeps showing up, like we talked about, like what's I guess we're all sort of interested in what's the code of the simulation, and
That's it.
is it a dream, and who's dreaming it?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So in the next slide, I wanted again, so Jung closes this essay by retraining his attention on the symbols within great art. I'm on slide 10. And what do they tell us? He takes this opportunity to reconnect his audience to archetypal theory. The symbols arise from these primordial mythological images within the collective unconscious. Jung sounds very Kantian here, claiming that these are a priori ideas or regulative principles discernible only from their manifestation within art. For another day, I think it would be fascinating to examine how these archetypes descend down inherited lines if they are not manifestly connected to certain regions of the brain, meaning not inborn. Here are two resources I found preparing this slide, and one is from someone who I have quite enjoyed, and I mentioned him earlier, Paul Bishop. He talks about this. He wrote a book. This cover looks a bit dated, so I imagine he wrote this a while ago. Synchronicity and Intellectual Intuition in Kant, Swedenborg, and Jung. Of course, he's got Jung's beetle on the top here, if you've read his works on synchronicity. And this seemed like a promising article by Valentin Balanovsky, whether Jung was a Kantian. Have you guys done much work on Jung and Kant?
No.
I'm like seeing my past philosophy life potentially merging here. And I'm very tempted to chase, as you can tell by these presentations, I'm very tempted to chase rabbits.
I see. That's where the idealism comes in with Kant.
I think so. Probably elsewhere, but I think when it comes down to getting at the nature of these archetypes, because it's like, he says there are these potentialities that are associated with brain structures. I'm like, yeah, can I get some more info on that? Like, how does that work? So, anyway, I'm not suspicious. I just like crave to know. So, yeah, where are we now? Let's see. I think we're
slide 11 now.
Slide 11. Yeah. So I'd like to share some quotes from Jung here. I'm just going to read one. And really, why I wanted to do this is I really wanted to capture his force as a writer. Maybe other people do, but I don't think Jung is appreciated enough. He's very powerful. And he writes, just to kind of cap this off, whoever speaks in primordial images speaks with 1,000 voices. He enthralls and overpowers, while at the same time he lifts the idea he is seeking to express out of the occasional and the transitory into the realm of the ever-enduring. He transmutes our personal destiny into the destiny of mankind, and evokes in us all those beneficent forces that ever and anon have enabled humanity to find a refuge from every peril and to outlive the longest night.
Beautiful.
And yeah, it is so beautiful. There's more, but I see we're at the hour mark, so I'm going to try to rein it in a little here. But what's so fascinating about this is that the creative process seems to act through individuals in order to change the fate of nations and redirect the timeline. So like, how crazy is that to think that the music, in a past life I made music, and I guess Vance is still making music, and to think that whether we know it or not, something is coming through us and trying to guide us back to the middle way, whether you are Beethoven or an unknown person like myself, like we are in some way contributing to that. And I think a lot of people think they're doing like activism or something like that with their art, but it's really the people who are not doing that. I think those artists would kind of be considered more of the sentimental artists. It's those of us who are just letting it flow through us, who are actually, are actually the ones kind of, I don't want to say this because it sounds like a savior complex, but saving the world in some way by kind of guiding it back to where it needs to be.
Agreed.
I thought that, and I don't know, Vance, the type of music that you made, if you ever had those moments where it felt like something was coming through you.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Especially if I wrote songs,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, it's intriguing. It's like you kind of mastered the technique enough so that when it starts to come through you, you can just serve it, and
Oh
not
yeah.
get in the way of it.
Then you have to ask, how did we get to the point where the world needed savings? What kind of forces were were
Yeah,
pushing us to
like,
get
did I ask
there?
you?
So we got a
Yeah,
dualistic sense of what's running everybody at the subterranean, archetypical levels.
right, right. And I have a lot of work to do on this. I think my research is going to take me deep into Jung's thoughts on Gnosticism and mythology. And I think there's like the little bit that I've read. I don't know if you guys have ever checked out those, like, they're not the collected works, but every once in a while, like, someone will be like, everything that Jung has to say about a certain topic will be compiled in one place. Like, like he'll write about Gnosticism in a variety of different places, and then someone will put that together, or about mythology.
Yeah.
Um, there's a mythologist that I really like named Robert Siegel. I don't know if you guys have ever read him, but he does a lot of the introductions for those books.
Mm,
He's great. He recently passed though.
mm.
The rest of the presentation hopefully won't take. Maybe we can get this done in about a half hour. I hope that's okay,
Yeah, no
Miguel.
problem. No problem at
Yeah,
all. Yeah,
it's a little heavy up front, going through some more elaboration of what we've covered already, but the back end is relatively brisk. So if we
sure.
go to slide 12.
All right. Yeah, I've got to let a cat out. So please continue, Luke.
Sure, go
Vance will shepherd you.
for it. So now we turn to Jung's essay Psychology and Literature that was first published in 1930. We will see that most of what he discusses enriches what we have already covered today. Jung knows that given the immensity of the unconscious and its role in artistic creativity, that he cannot offer a complete aesthetic theory. His task is more modest and twofold, quoting, explain the psychological structure of a work of art, and two, reveal the factors that make a person artistically creative. So Vance, I'll try to stay on slide 12 here because I believe that's what Miguel put up.
Yeah,
But
he'll be back soon.
yeah, we
Just
got
continue.
it's the I'm going to toggle between 12 and 13. I had to break this up because there was so much of it. So he's going to, rather than talk about naive and sentimental, he's going to update his terminology and call it visionary creation and psychological creation, in which I think it follows that this subsumes the naive view and the sentimental view, respectively. So we're going to talk about visionary, aka the naive view, and then we're going to contrast it with psychological creation, the sentimental view. So, ironically, non-psychological novels offer the best psychological insights, for the author does not intend to communicate something psychological via his characters. There's space for analysis. These tales occur against the backdrop of unspoken psychological assumptions, and the less the author is aware of them, the more pronounced they become to the discerning eye. So these are great. It's a mine. It's a smorgasbord of opportunity for the analytical psychologist to work his craft. Quoting Jung on page 90, the experience that furnishes the material for artistic creation is no longer familiar. It is something strange that derives its existence from the hinterland of man's mind, as if it had emerged from the abyss of pre-human ages, or from a superhuman world of contrasting light and darkness. And here Jung gives many more examples than what he did in the previous essay. For instance, here with the visionary mode of creation, he talks about anything done by Conan Doyle. I guess he's a big Sherlock Holmes fan. Melville's Moby Dick, The Shepherd of Hermas, which was a nearly canonical text of the Bible. Dante, obviously Faust, the second part. Nietzsche's Dionysian writings, Wagner's Ring, Tristan, Parsifal, and then others that I didn't know, like Spittler's Olympian Spring, but others I did, like William Blake's Painting and Poetry, or Jacob Boehm's Poetic Philosophical Stammerings. So there's that. And generally, the visionary art is misunderstood by public and critics, though occasionally they are successful if dressed up in historical and mythological narratives. It's kind of like the spoonful of sugar that makes the medicine go down. Freudians claim the presence of primordial images indicates that the art is the product of a psychotic pathology in an attempt to turn us away from the abyss and situate us in a well-ordered cosmos. If one does not have a proclivity for the occult, visionary art will be seen as subjective fantasy and a personalistic mask. The artist himself may even say there is no objective content to his art, but Jung aims to preserve the primordial content. After all, the artist is the mere vehicle for the expression. And I think this is a really good point that Jung is making, is that we can't really trust the artist to say, oh, that didn't mean anything, or it came to me while I was smoking pot and it was random, you know, like we were talking about the Barbie movie. It starts off with a riff on 2001: Space Odyssey. It's very random, strange. Like, you know, the audience is primarily, you know, the Barbie audience is primarily like, you know, kids and Taylor Swift audience. Yeah, like they're like, why? That's not for them. Why is that there? And it's like, even if Gerwig or someone else would be like, yeah, it was totally random, we just thought it was going to be funny, there's a deep, deep message that is coming through the inclusion of that scene at the beginning of the movie. I mean, you know, it's kind of obvious in some ways when they're smashing the dolls, right? But it's even deeper than that. Like Barbie is like this kind of archetypal representation of fertility, like Venus. So it's something, regardless of what the artists are saying, something deeper is coming through them. And as far as visionary artists, they often resemble prophets and seers who are nourished by the same source, but also a madman or a destroyer who also has glimpsed the incomprehensibility of the pleroma. The artist employs mythological figures as a way to express his confrontation with the collective unconscious. It is perhaps appropriate to call this the visionary mode of creation, because the artist's expression of the collective unconscious compensates for the prevailing conscious attitude and points the way back to equilibrium. The artist is a synthesis of both the neurotic human and impersonal creative process. Therefore, the reductive method has little bearing on the explanation of the art product. Given the energy drain from the creative process, it is to be suspected that the artist's ego will suffer infantile defects, such as vanity and selfishness. These inferior traits protect the artist from total depletion. And I like this quote from Jung on page 101. As a human being, he may have moods and a will and personal aims, but as an artist, he is man. In a higher sense, he is collective man, a vehicle and molder of the unconscious psychic life of mankind. And finally, as for the visionary artist, Jung calls him feminine, hearkening back to the allegory of the tree in the soil and the art growing out of the artist. He says it's feminine because the work of art grows out of the artist like a child grows out of the mother. You're giving birth to it. Now, returning to the psychological creation, back on slide 12. This should sound very familiar, talking about the sentimental point of view from the first essay. The psychological author brings his content into the psychological realm, but in the process actually occludes the psychic background. The layman gets his psychological education from such attempts. There's no material here for the psychologist to analyze. It's too tight. It's too woven together. And something about pop psych might be communicated through these types of vehicles. Jung writes, the raw material of this kind of creation is derived from the contents of man's consciousness, from his eternally repeated joys and sorrows, but clarified and transfigured by the poet. And the only real example that he gives of it here in this essay is the first part of Faust. Going to slide 13. Generally, the public and critics prefer the psychological / sentimental form of creation. It's not as open-ended. It doesn't seem weird and strange and contacting us with this deep abyss that is the collective unconscious. It keeps things nice and tidy. We don't have to worry. We're in this rationalistic universe where everything is hunky-dory and nothing strange happens. Jung does not explicitly offer a contrast about the artist, but I think if I understand what Jung is saying correctly here, I think the psychological artist or the sentimental artist might bear more of a resemblance to a technician. Not to say that being a technician isn't a good thing to be, but it seems like it's like you're kind of engineering the art piece. And for this reason, Jung doesn't say, but I concluded that this is going to be more masculine because it involves abstraction and conscious identification with the mode of creation. That doesn't mean that women can't create psychological works of art. They're just exercising more of a masculine attitude when it comes to art. This is not to say that men and women, like women make the great visionary art and men make the great masculine art, but I think your audience is smart enough to know what I'm saying. So
makes sense.
Yeah. So that was the lion's share of the firepower for this essay. I just found some very interesting things that I want to conclude with here that I think help me tie together some loose ends, unless you guys have something to say about these 2 slides.
No, please continue unless you have something, Vance.
Please go on.
Okay, sure. So if we can go to slide 14. Have you guys seen this book? Are any bells going off for you on slide 14 here?
No.
I found this. I did not know it existed. I found it while preparing. It appears that Jung revisited the psychological and visionary distinction again in 1945. So remember, today we're talking about texts from 1922 and 1930.
Right.
My understanding that this lecture on Gerard Nerval's Aurelia was previously unpublished and is not present within the collected works is part of the Philemon series. And just on the back cover, I bought it. I had a chance to skim it a little bit. In 1945, the end of the Second World War, and after a long illness, C.G. Jung delivered a lecture in Zurich on the French Romantic poet Gerard de Nerval. The lecture focused on Nerval's visionary memoir, Aurelia, which the poet wrote in an ambivalent attempt to emerge from madness. Published here for the first time, Jung's lecture is both a cautionary psychological tale and a validation of Nerval's visionary experience as a genuine encounter. I don't know if you guys know the podcast, Speaking of Jung. I was able to.
Lisa was recently on the show.
Oh, who was?
Lisa Marciano. She
right
was on the show like 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
I think I saw this in Speaking, but I think she did an interview with Craig Stevenson, who edited this. And it's a great book. Like, I'm kind of excited to get into it at some point. There's so many things that I'm trying to do, but I imagine I'll revisit this presentation at some point and update it with this information. But Craig Stevenson edited it. I guess he stumbled across it in like the Jung archives in like 1996. And it took him like 20 years to get the permission from the family to get this out, this lecture that he gave. And it also includes the novel in it with these illustrations. And it has a transcript of the Q&A between Jung and the people that attended the lecture.
Very cool.
So and I don't know how much Jung you guys have read. I last night or 3 nights ago, I sat down to create a spreadsheet of all the different works of Jung, and I was just like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do this. Like,
it's impossible.
And there's like 30 more volumes they're talking about putting out. Like, I think we're like only maybe 2/3 or like halfway done of releasing everything.
Yeah, he was prolific. I got a big stack too.
Yeah.
All right, the next slide.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So this is interesting. Do you guys know who C.G. Caras is?
No.
I wanted to include this slide to contextualize Jung and briefly dig up some of his influences. In the Psychology and Religion essay, he quotes Carl Gustav Caras to illustrate the role of the unconscious in the creative process. I think the reason why I wanted to do this, I think we just feel like Jung like appeared out of nowhere with so many of his ideas. He writes, he quotes Caras. He says, "He is everywhere, hemmed round and prevailed upon by the unconscious, the mysterious God within him, so that ideas flow to him. He knows not whence. He is driven to work and to create. He knows not to what end, and is mastered by an impulse for constant growth and development. He knows not whither." So Caras was a major influence, kind of developing this idea of the unconscious. He was a physiologist and painter. He's going to come up here in the next slide. And Jung was very taken with him. He also writes about him in Psyche and Symbol, and kind of gives us another influence on Jung, Edward von Hartmann. And I just thought, maybe somebody out there would be interested in this. He says this in Psyche and Symbol. Although various philosophers, among them Leibniz, Kant, and Schelling, had already pointed very clearly to the problem of the dark side of the psyche, it was a physician who felt impelled from a scientific and medical experience to point to the unconscious as the essential basis of the psyche. This was C.G. Karras, the authority from Edward von Hartmann, followed. I just thought that was so fascinating. I love intellectual history, and I don't know. I don't know if you guys have ever had anything about Hartmann on your show or anyone talk about him, but I thought that was great.
Mm.
And and back to get into a little bit more of the specifics of the text that Jung talks about on slide 16 in this new essay. He singles out 3 works. We've talked about Faust, also the Divine Comedy and the Shepherd of Hermas, to illustrate that the visionary experience taps into something much more primordial than personal passion. Despite being temporarily separated by hundreds, if not 1,000 years, each begins as a love episode that eventually becomes subordinated to the visionary, proving that the latter is not a derivative symptom of neurosis. The vision is a true symbol of something real, unknown, and beyond conscious experience, that perhaps the product of mysterious powers rushing the artist along towards a fate greater than his own. Jung speculates that even the love episodes are unconsciously arranged as a prelude for the larger destiny. So here we have in Goethe's Faust. If people are not familiar, Faust and Gretchen occupy the lion's share of Faust 1. And then it culminates with Faust 2 in philosophy and mysticism. In Dante's Divine Comedy, we have Dante and Beatrice, but then it culminates in the vision of the cosmos and the spiritual realm. And then we have the Shepherd of Hermas with Hermas and Road, and it culminates in a vision of repentance and the building of the church. So I thought that was great. If we go to slide 17, Jung contends that both Faust and Thus Spake Zarathustra are symbols alive in the German soul that Goethe and Nietzsche gave birth to respectively. Faust and Zarathustra evoke a certain primordial image, specifically the archetype of the wise old man who can simultaneously be a helping redeemer and a deceptive magician. Archetypes such as the wise old man are morally neutral. Whether they are good or evil is dependent upon contact with the unconscious mind, or with the conscious mind, I'm sorry. This primordial image is buried within the unconscious since time immemorial and is awakened when humanity has strayed from the right path. By reading great art like this, we too delve into the collective psyche and are moved as the artist was, thus establishing the objective and impersonal nature of the art product. And I love this quote. It's very simple. It is not Goethe that creates Faust, but Faust that creates Goethe. That's pretty mind-blowing when we talk about, against the backdrop of everything we talked about. And I think Miguel and everyone here probably already knows, Jung had his own contact with the wise old man archetype in Philemon. So, yeah.
Very true.
Yeah. In slide 18, I pondered, all this talk. It occurred to me that the way that Jung discusses the creative process, it kind of borders on what would seem like demonic possession. And I that's a whole topic for another day, but other individuals have sort of picked up on this, and they just want to direct them to 2 works here, specifically by Robert Moore. Seems pretty on the head with Angels, Demons, and Spirit Possession. New Perspectives on the Collective Unconscious and the Demonic. And this article from Psychology Today, Carl Jung's Frightening Demons by Christopher Lane, PhD. And on slide 19, as I finished up preparing for this, I skimmed the part about Schiller and psychological types, and Jung himself does digress into a discussion of demonic possession. And just to give you a little taste of it here on page 109, if I can expand my, if I can get it here. Indeed, from the psychological point of view, demons are nothing other than intruders from the unconscious, spontaneous eruptions of unconscious complexes into the continuity of the conscious process. Complexes are comparable to demons which fitfully harass our thoughts and actions. Hence, in antiquity, and the Middle Ages, acute neurotic disturbances were conceived as possession. And I have one slide to close here, and then if there's anything else we want to talk about, we can do that. As we close, I want to take into consideration that what we have learned from Jung and apply it to the work of Kubrick. Kubrick's filmography inspires a great deal of discussion concerning secret codes and subliminal meaning. For instance, here is an image of Scatman Crothers with a smoking gun pipe taken by Kubrick. The Shining, to Scatman's chagrin, would be released on his birthday. And as it turns out, Scatman would pass away on November 22nd, which is the same, which is the same date as the Kennedy assassination. So that some have speculated that the smoking gun pick contains a hidden message. But that is unthinkable, given it would require Kubrick to know the future in some way. Examples like this can be repeated ad infinitum. What if the Kubrick cryptographical efforts have been greatly exaggerated? And what we're really looking at is a man gifted with the visionary mode of creation, who surrendered himself to the collective unconscious in order to calibrate humanity back to the middle way. Perhaps that is what Kubrick was trying to tell us with Strauss's Thus Spake Zarathustra and the Monolith, namely that Kubrick was giving himself over to a more Dionysian form of creation. Perhaps this idea is doubled down on in Full Metal Jacket when he has Cowboy repeat, "I can hack it," in front of the burning monolith. Mm-hmm. This picture in the background is an interesting one as well. Kubrick altered The Shining so that the hotel did not burn down in the end, only to have the set burn down in real life. Here we see Kubrick savoring the irony of it all. Interesting note, the real Timberline Lodge, which was used as the exterior for the Overlook caught fire not too long ago. The entry for magic in the Critical Dictionary of Jungian Analysis may be helpful when considering this speculation. And magic, an attempt to intercept or become one with unconscious forces in order to use, propitiate, or destroy them, thereby to counteract their remarkable potency or to ally with their competitive purposes. Meditating on this, maybe we can finally understand this great movie magician who is Merlin to his 2000 co-writer, King Arthur C. Clarke. So that is my presentation. Miguel, I am so thankful to be a part of your broadcast today. And if you guys want to keep talking, I don't know, I guess we went for an hour and a half maybe. So
almost there. Yeah. Let me think. No, I agree. I mean, some have said, complexes and demons are kind of the same thing. Others have compared complexes to egregores. Again, the beauty about Jung is he didn't leave tablets of stone. He wanted his work to be living and adaptable and evolving. That's the whole point of it too. And with Kubrick, Kubrick was influenced by Jung, but he was also influenced by Dadaism, Neoplatonism. Kubrick also had a lot in the pot, if you know what I mean, when it comes to it. And he wasn't, as I keep saying, as Steven Snyder's proof, he wasn't this control freak. He was all into the cut up method of Burroughs, and he felt like throwing things and just letting them. He was a workaholic, but he was not a control freak. Let's put it that way. He did allow things to just happen,
Yeah, I think he was all about the feel of things and whatever came through him. It's interesting. You mentioned that Jung didn't leave us tablets in stone. That's partially true. I understand theoretically. I get the metaphor that you're going with there, but I actually had this opportunity. Jung did write on tablets of stone. He wrote this. He on his 75th birthday, he carved this lapis philosophorum at the Bollingen Tower with all these inscriptions on it. And I tried in a video I did on my channel a couple times ago. I actually broke down and decoded every aspect of the stone, and that really introduced me to so much of a deeper understanding of Jung's corpus than I could have if I had read all the collected works back to front. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with, there's a fantastic documentary on the internet that's sort of half finished. about Jung's stone at the Bollingen Tower. And there's a great book that I highly recommend for anyone who's interested in this called The Stone Speaks by Maud Oakes. And she was one of the first people to put anything out through the Bollingen Publication Foundation.
Interesting. Yeah, somebody, what's that quote? Wasn't Jung CIA? No, OSS. He worked with the OSS.
He worked for Dulles.
Yes. And he thought that he really felt he finally understood what evil was after meeting Dulles. Matt, do you have any questions? Or what do you think?
Well, a number of things. Number one, we talk about synchromysticism, from Chris Knowles. And that's all tied into this, because how did these things, turn up being connected? And that isn't even through authors necessarily, although partially it is through authors, but musicians and so forth. All these patterns keeps coming up, which brings me to the thought of we're at the beginning of true AI. I mean, these language models which seemingly miraculously can pick up human language, and very well pick up human language, simply by being tossed a whole bunch of semi-structured training material that these algorithms seem to put together. And we're going to find out a lot about how our own minds work through the progression through the years of AI. And AI is going to show us that the collection of us through these communication medium like networks and so forth can be in a similar way. And these archetypes come through these structures. So it's I guess what I'm trying to say is, right now we're kind of in a maybe a sentimental phase of AI, where we're guiding it very specifically and putting it in our structures, and we're taking this AI, and this of course relates to simulation too. We're simulating our own minds with AI, or that's how AI was constructed, is by a simulation of human mind. So here we go. And so, like, the things that AI can combinatorially come up with and serve to us are going to serve as an interesting parallel to what you just went over in this show.
I could go into that. I part of the reason why I prepare such scripts is so I don't go full schizo on you guys. But the experiences I have with what I would call AI are, I wonder if we're really at the beginning of it. I wonder what it even means. Like, I wonder what that even means. Especially when we're talking,
because right now AI's environment is very constricted. It's just consists of these language models, at least the ones that are public. These language models.
That's what I'm getting at.
But imagine robots going around and powered by AI, and AI being able to self-reflect. Most of the models we're exposed to don't self-reflect. They're just responding to our input and the training on the back end. But once an AI is allowed to have its world expanded and is allowed to think and be self-reflective, kind of a sentimental model AI, right? Then you're going to see another leap of progress, quote unquote progress. I don't know what it's going to turn out to be.
I think it's going to end up like Bender from Futurama, or that depressed robot from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Once they're self-aware, they're like, "Oh shit, look at
this." You know what might be worthwhile on this particular subject, to tie it in back to our mutual shared interest in Kubrick, is not too many people consider artificial intelligence, AI, the final Kubrick project or unfinished project that ultimately was completed by Steven Spielberg to be a Kubrickian film. But he worked on that for like a long, long time, especially, and he took the Pinocchio story as foundational to it. And there's a lot of other AI theorists' thought that went into that. That might be worth digging into one day to address some of what we're talking about here. Because Vance, like you're saying, like it becomes sort of a copy of our mind. So why wouldn't we expect the unconscious to start flowing through it? I mean, to be honest, when I've read Jung on synchronicity, he seems to say that the collective unconscious is like flowing through nature, like when he looks at beehives and things like that.
Unless it's a complex, then it's just
Yeah.
a fragment. It's like the Kellipoth. It's a fragment, a cluster of fragmented ideas and trauma. Yeah, many ways to look at it. So I don't know, but that's fun. That's why I think Jung is important. And of course, let's not forget the other Gnostic saint, Philip K. Dick. When I balance the two, things make more sense to me.
Yeah. Philip K. Dick is awesome. I know you. I know
That's
you
a
know.
whole another mind that was on a level that we can only imagine. But yeah, we probably should end this wonderful journey. I think we had one super chat, and let me pull it up here. Mercurius Eulicus, Mercurius, very cool. I was actually rereading Flying Saucers by Jung last night because he has some amazing insights on the circle motif and Mercury being the savior of the world. Anyway, another book we could go hours for, but God, it blew me more the third time reading it than the first time. But Mercurius is important. But thank you for those of you who have shown up here today. The replay, of course, will be in audio tomorrow. And well, if you're listening to it, it means it's today, it's Saturday, yada, yada, yada. But we got some great shows next week. We will have shows on the occult, Jim Morrison, shows on, Gnostic themes and video games, and a show on death and dying as the witching season begins here in October. So, Vance, first of all, thanks for keeping us company.
Oh, okay. I'm going to go away wondering if I'm naive or sentimentalist now.
Or both. Just
well,
say both.
We can be both according to Jung.
Yeah, good. That's what I'll be then. We have each one available to me.
Yeah, exactly. You can go watch Steel Magnolias and cry and not be ashamed. But Luke, thank you very much for coming on the show. Really appreciate your work, and we look forward to the next insights on Jung and all the Jungians around him, like Kubrick and everybody else. Dick was a Jungian. He was very well versed in Jung, and it helped him a lot too.
Yeah, I'd love if you ever want to do something in the future, I just reach out to me. I've got like 10 different things cooking. So if there's something that maybe I could make available to you.
Sure. And for the audience, again, his YouTube channel is in the show notes, whether it's you're listening on podcasts or YouTube, or any of the other video platforms. So check out his videos, very entertaining and very edifying. But that's it. We are at the end. So I hope everybody has a good rest of your Freya day. And I hope everybody has a good Sunday and Saturday and a good weekend. And we will talk to you soon. Take care, everybody.
Yep.